Welcome to the Apartment Investor Pro podcast, where we talk about how to be a more successful multifamily investor with a focus on using technology to boost your business. And now your host, Todd Heitner.
Welcome to episode 10 of the Apartment Investor Pro podcast. Our topic today is how to manage your investors for multifamily syndication deals. I'm so excited I was able to get Josiah Mann in the flesh to come on today to meet you and share his expertise. Josiah is the founder and creator of Investor Deal Room. As a sponsor, he ran into the logistical difficulties of capital raising and was amazed that nothing already existed to solve these problems. So he decided to develop and build Investor Deal Room to systematically eliminate the sets of problems that every successful syndicator faces that prevent them from scaling effectively. Today, Josiah will be dropping knowledge bombs on who investor portal software is for and who doesn't need it, better free solutions for those who don't need a robust portal, a personalized demo tour through your investor's eyes that you'll actually get to see behind the scenes on that, the number one way syndicators become a target risk for hackers, and the 3-second check to see if your accounts have been compromised. So let's get right into it. Josiah, thanks so much for coming on with me today. Can you tell us a little bit about your company, about Investor Deal Room? What is that and what does it do?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for having me, Todd. I'm glad to be on. Investor Deal Room is an investor portal, a real estate investor portal for syndicators to let their investors view all their documents and let the syndicator send out project updates and kind of just manage their syndication through the whole process from capital raise through, you actually get rid of the asset. So it's a all-in-one investor portal software for real estate syndicators. Okay,
cool. And so how did this come about? Like, why did you guys develop Investor Deal Room?
So I had a web design company and had taught myself to code many years ago and started building websites for people. I really enjoyed doing that, but I wanted to build software and had been playing around with stuff. And I, at the same time, read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, like most of our syndicator friends have done. And then I started reading multifamily books and listening to podcasts, and I just got really involved in that world. And I don't know if it was my subconscious leading me or what happened, but I ended up like trying to become a syndicator myself and going through some training where I spent about a year trying to syndicate a deal. And I did all the things you're supposed to do as a syndicator. I was putting out offers and I was talking to brokers and building a list. And the whole time I was doing that, I thought that there were some obvious things that I was surprised that certain tools didn't exist in the industry as a person starting out, a basic CRM and a place to keep track of stuff like that. So I had thought about creating something like that, but I was really focused on getting a deal. Then pretty much after I'd been doing it for about a year, I decided to take a break and refocus and determine, I was kind of burning my own savings to try to make a deal happen. So I had to go back and get a job and focus for a little bit and rethink my strategy. And I decided at that point that it'd be a good idea for me to build software for the industry and then come back later when I wanted to do a deal down the line. But that would give me an opportunity to get to know syndicators, to work with successful syndicators and be in the game a little bit. So I initially thought I was just going to build a CRM, and I actually started building like this CRM, and it had a project management or like, you could just a real basic thing. But after like a month of building it on the side, I realized like, I don't actually know what successful syndicators need in their business. I'm kind of just assuming that they would need this. I was a not successful syndicator, and I don't want to serve not successful syndicators and who can't pay me anything like me. So I decided to just try to call a bunch of syndicators and get on the phone and call people who were actually successful and who'd actually syndicated multiple deals. And that's what really led to the creation of Investor Deal Room. I surveyed, I know that I called about 100 people and did surveys, but some of them, it was hard at the time to figure out who was a syndicator, who was a real estate investor, who was a private equity real estate company. It was a little bit hard to differentiate who was who, but I talked to a few that were clearly really successful syndicators and had done these big syndications and had hundreds of investors. And they all articulated the same sets of problems, which was that, when we're going through this, when we're doing the capital raise process with 100 or 200 passive investors, managing that process, we have a spreadsheet, and then we have another spreadsheet that backs that up. And then we have DocuSign and Dropbox, and we have, just this big cluster. And so and they were also spending money on like one-time solutions, like a one-off investor portal that was only for that deal. But then as that person kept syndicating, and they had 3 deals now, investors had 3 different logins. So those were kind of the opportunities that I saw to create a central login where everybody could see all their investments in one place and so forth.
Okay. So it's kind of a combination of what the need that you saw from an understanding of syndication, but then also combined with real world interviews with other, syndicators that they needed. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I kind of had a premise going in, and I use this framework actually for asking questions, because it's really easy when you're trying to figure out what to build to just assume and be wrong and spend a lot of time and energy building the wrong things. So there's this framework for having educated guesses, but not leaning too hard into them, not saying like, so do you need a CRM, but saying, when it comes to this part of your business, what are your biggest challenges? So more open-ended questions. That way, you're not influencing, what they're saying. And so there was really 2 sets of problems. I mean, everybody, all of the syndicators who hadn't done very, very big deals needed help raising money. They're like, well, we want to raise more money and do bigger deals. But then all the syndicators who did bigger deals and had raised a lot of money, they're like, man, we're raising a lot of money, but it's really, really difficult to manage now. And it's a nightmare. So that was the problem I chose to focus on.
Okay, cool. And so you kind of touched on this a little bit, but some of the different pain points that people have, but like, what are some of the problems that Investor Deal Room solves, and like, why would somebody need this?
Yeah. So the first problem I mentioned is kind of in the capital raise process. So if you're doing a raise, I would say if it's, if you have more than 50 investors going through a capital raise, it's very hard to keep track of where everybody's at in that process. And there's a lot of steps along the way. So it's, okay, who are the potential investors? Okay, maybe you hold a webinar and get soft commits. And then everybody's saying, okay, I'm in for 50 grand, I'm in 50 grand. Well, then from there, you've got to have them fill out some information on like how they're investing, their legal information. They have to sign documents. You've got to countersign those documents. They've got to wire funds. You got to confirm that they've received funds, which investor have those funds come in from. And so you end up with this big spreadsheet in like stages of, has this been done? Has this been done? Has this been done for, 100 investors? And what was happening, or first of all, it's to the investor, it feels disorganized because they're getting a bunch of one-off communications from you about, there's no central place for them to see any process or any documentation. So it's just like waiting on you. And it might be 3 days because you're going through your 100 investors. And then it was really easy for people to just be dropping balls, which is like investor 1 committed for 50,000. And then a week later, we hadn't followed up and that seemed unprofessional to them. So we just don't get a response now. So it was really important for the syndicators I talked to have the steps be very clear and outlined for the investors so they could see, I'm here, I need to do these 3 things, I'm done. And like, for example, when I complete my subscription documents as an investor, I need to see wiring instructions right then, because that's when I just set aside 30 minutes to sign this stupid document. Like that, now's your best opportunity to get my money, and don't make me wait another 2 or 3 days or making me call you or, so that whole thing, it's just having clarity and a good business process was really important. And the other thing is the first client I had, he paid for a service. There's a service that they do this for one-off portals. So per deal, and it's like $3 to $5 grand per deal. And then it's like, there's no e-signing or anything. It's like, investor goes in, commits, downloads documents, fills them out by hand, re-uploads. It's a pretty clunky process, really. It gets the job done, but there's no beauty to the user interface. It's clunky. So they'd done this for a few different deals, and they're like, if we're spending all this money for this anyways, why can't we have something where it's our brand, it's our company, and then the investors log in, they have one login, and then if there's a new deal, they just go through the new deal process, and then they see both deals in one place. So from the user experience perspective, it really serves the sponsor to give them that, like, to just make them more professional and organized too.
Okay, that's cool. And so then, like with your solution, there it is branded, so it's got their company name on it. It looks like part of their, like an extension of their own, maybe their website. Is that right?
Yeah, it's white labeled, their logo, their company name, that type of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm sure this isn't for everybody. So like, what are some symptoms or signs that someone would be a good candidate for your service then?
Yeah. So there's two big things, and there's kind of two clients that are a really good client for us. One is if they're doing like raising capital 4 times a year or multiple times per year, and they have a lot of investors in each raise. So in those cases, when somebody's already done a bunch of raises, they get pretty familiar with this painful process, and you kind of learn to cope the best you can, and you create systems around it. But it becomes obvious that you need some type of centralizing solution. Just for example, if you've been raising capital for 2 or 3 years and you've got a few deals under your belt, you're going to start having investors ask for previous year's K1s, or they'll notice an error from the last year's K1 because you didn't have the legal information exactly right. And the longer you're in business, the more of those little things stack up to, okay, that's a week of a CPA looking through our records to solve that one problem. And it just kind of is a compounding problem. So if anytime somebody has a lot of investors and they're doing multiple raises, that's sign one that, like, you can really organize your process and give those investors clarity and just kind of put that on autopilot instead of having to manually check through everything, which we'll show you in the demo. That process can really be centralized and on autopilot. You don't have to have spreadsheets. And the other set of symptoms, it's also when you have a lot of investors, but it's, you have 100 investors or 50 investors, but it's over 10 plus deals. So even if you've got a really smooth capital raise process, now you have investors saying, hey, I need to make an update to this, to my investment profile. Oh, I want to move this investment from an LLC to my personal name. Or I need to change the bank account on this investment to receive my payments in a different place. So when updates start becoming like a daily, like multiple times per week, you're getting investor update requests, and you realize you've got 3 sets of spreadsheets and you don't really know what's the source of truth, right? Like, do I update this one? Do I update all 3? What are we using what do we give to our accountant? And that starts becoming a question in your head. And at that point, you really need to have a source of truth. And it's just like one place for your investments, distributions, for the CPA to log in and see everything, for the investors to self-update. So that's when Investor Deal Room becomes really useful too, is somebody's got 10 plus deals. And the benefit to you in the back office sense is you get a central source of truth. And that means, there's all kinds of tools for helping you clean that data up and make sure that your accountant and your whoever's sending out distributions have the correct data. But then on the investor side, it's just a huge, jump up in professionalism where they can go in and make an update. They know that you've received the update and you can approve it, or they can see all their investments, distributions, documents, project updates in one place. So that's where it's like a clear and obvious need. I think the last thing is, there are smaller customers that we work with who see the value in it earlier on in their process, right? So you've got a few deals and maybe you're growing a little bit more slowly and you just want to build that type of business that over delivers on customer service. Like, I just want to give a great experience to my investors. Those are also good customers for us, but you might not necessarily be feeling the pain as much as someone who has 500 investors. But if you really want to deliver an exceptional customer service experience for your investors and give them the best, that's what I think is another good client for us.
Okay. So I take it then probably people wouldn't typically sign up when they're doing their first deal, but maybe a little bit farther along in the process, or what would you say?
I think so. And some of it's personal opinion. There are other providers like what we do that I think like to do the first deal for people. But for us, I and maybe it's because of how I learn myself. I learn by doing first, and then I use technology afterwards. Like, I have to get in and feel a little bit of pain in all things in my life. So technology doesn't solve all pains, and it doesn't make things perfect. There's some trade-offs, right? So if, for example, our capital raising solution, it's very robust, it's very flexible. And if you have 100 investors, it really can put them on autopilot, and in no time, everybody's done and signed. But you've got to learn to use a tool that's got a lot of buttons, and it takes a little bit of time to get used to. So it's not something you can just throw up and like, okay, that's taken care of. That's not really the type of thing it is. So I think when you've gone through a couple raises, it's healthy, I think, to do it the manual way, to send out documents, to do it on a spreadsheet. And most people aren't going to do 100 investors in their first deal. Most people, it's a gradual process, right? You'll do 30 and 50 and 70. Like if you've gone through that type of process and you feel like, okay, I understand what I need real well, then you've kind of got those reference points for what would be good to improve your process. But I don't think it's as much for a first time deal, but maybe a third, fourth deal type thing.
Okay. So maybe starting off manually, then tracking things, doing all that stuff which I guess, in addition to learning the process, you also are saving some money in the beginning too, when you're maybe starting up some of that.
Yeah. And we like working with people. It's just not on the capital raise part. Like, so if you want to, like, we have different tiers of the product where you can just have the investments, distributions, like the investor portal, but not the capital raise tools. And I think those are a good fit for somebody who's just starting out, where do your first deal, it costs less up front. You don't have to pay the extra money, so you save the money. But after the investor does the deal, they still have a login. They can see their investment, their distributions, their documents. So that's really the professional customer service part. And I think that's really valuable first deal to do either way. But as far as the capital raising part, at least having gone through one deal, and I don't know, it's something about experiencing the fire a little bit, experiencing the pain a little bit, makes the solution so much more sweet. So that's our perspective and what we've learned anyways.
Right. Okay. Cool. And you mentioned a minute ago about a demo. And so I appreciate that you're willing to show a demo of what your system is, what it works, what it does, how it works. Are you ready to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, sure.
Here's just a sample of the login page. There's probably a couple ways I could take you through the process, but I'll just take you through a little bit of the investor portal experience. So this is an example of an existing investor. So let's say you've already done your raise and you want to launch this portal to those investors that were in the first deal. So I'm going to log in here. Whoops. Good. So here's the initial login screen. So it's your logo here. This is all the white labeling that we do. Well, it's your logo and your branding everywhere.
And just a quick question, like at the, does this show up as like a subdomain of the person's domain? Is it like,
yeah, so
their domain?
That's a good question. So we do, it depends on the tier you get. So you can pay extra to have it totally white labeled, which means some of our customers will have investor.theircompany.com. So our name's nowhere in it. And it's the same thing with like the Powered by Investor Deal Room. Like those are just different things that we can, if you want to do it a little cheaper, we can have those things on our subdomain. So it's yourcompany.investordealroom.com. If you pay a little extra, then we can remove that totally and link it directly to your domain.
Okay. Sounds good.
So here's a logged in investor. He has, and in this case, he actually has 2 investments. So here's kind of what he would see. You have a little custom welcome message that he can see when he logs in. He can see some overall metrics about his portfolio. So his distributions, his total investments, what his returns are. And then, so this is the kind of upgraded module where if you're doing big raises and all that stuff, you have a whole opportunities or the capital raise part. And that's a pretty smooth capital raise process, but I'm going to skip over that for a second and show the other part's just investments. So your investments with our company, if you have past investments that have closed, they're still there in the portal. So it lets them just see everything in one place. And we can see here, let's just look at this one. It's got 50,000 invested. That's the legal entity he's invested with. His ownership percentage. This one looks more realistic. I don't know why he has 50% in that. And then initially here, he kind of has, so he can see some of the details about the investment. If you had an investment class, you could show it was class A or class B, his ownership percentage, some overall metrics. And then the tabs here are the additional information. So project updates, you're going to send out quarterly or monthly updates on the asset. So he can come in here, he'll get an email that links him directly to this and pops this up, and that can have images and all of that stuff. So instead of doing like a MailChimp or using a separate email service for that, you could do that from the portal, and it would email all your investors in the deal. Distributions, shows just a list of all of their distributions so far and some metrics on those. Documents, so those are organized into folders that they can see. This is kind of an easy example where we just have a couple different documents here, but you actually have, it stays pretty organized even when you have 100 documents for an investor, because they can kind of, show how many they want per page. They can scroll through, they can quickly type. So, documents seem like a small thing, but it's amazing when somebody gets enough investors, how easy it is to get overwhelmed by that stuff, because investors have to, usually people are using Dropbox for this, and like the folder-based system in Dropbox, it's really difficult for the sponsor to manage each individual investor who gets what inside of there. Then you've got another folder for another project, but you really have to have a folder for each investor, right? And so for the sponsor, it's difficult to manage. And then you end up having investors, after the deal a year later, like, hey, do you have a link to this folder where this document was? Because it's all just kind of organized via links. So you end up organized by deal instead. So I know that in this deal, I've got all my documents for this deal. And then they also have a documents folder, which shows them all their documents across the portal. And they can just type in, whatever they want to type and find that document.
And that's going to be for any deals in this place?
Exactly. So then they could filter by deal if they wanted to, and it'll show just, filter and search by deal as well. So yeah, so the documents tab out here. So we've actually done, I can't imagine there are many other companies that have done more work than we have on our document stuff, because we're just obsessed with user experience. And that means the investor experience being as simple as it possibly can. And I don't want the investor to bother the syndicator.
Let's take a moment to thank our sponsor. After the break, Josiah talks about why he's obsessed with user experience, what will quickly halt your efforts to scale your capital raising. One sponsor's story of going to bed one night worried he'd never raised the capital for the deal he was working on, and woke up the next morning with an extra $300,000 in the bank account. And what basic security practices every syndicator should be paying attention to, as well as ways you can prevent the risk of fraud, the single biggest risk to syndicators. So stay tuned for all of that after our break.
Do you have a website that gives you credibility and captures leads? ApartmentInvestorPro.com can help you get a professional website today. Typically, building a professional website can be a real pain, taking thousands of dollars and months of your time. One syndicator said it took him 10 months on his own. Another had to go through 3 different companies before getting something usable. ApartmentInvestorPro.com makes it quick and painless. All the design and content is already created. With 15 years of experience building websites for investors, ApartmentInvestorPro.com gives you peace of mind and lets you focus your time on finding deals and investors. These powerful websites capture contact information from your potential investors. You can even automate the follow-up process. No more letting good investor leads fall through the cracks. Save 10% on your website by going to ApartmentInvestorPro.com and using coupon code PODCAST.
We're just obsessed with user experience, and that means the investor experience being as simple as it possibly can. And I don't want the investor to bother the syndicator, about non-important things. Now, obviously, what's the next deal? That's a great email to have. But where's my document, and how do I update my legal entity, or how do I change this investment? That's stuff that if you want to scale your business, you can't be spending your time on all the time. So the way you solve that is by really, really good user experience that it's just easy, and it feels just easy to the investor. Like they don't know what it is, but it's just easy to find what they're looking for. And one of the things that I think we've done good with is a lot of our competitors have all the bells and whistles. They're great. They're great in that they have these complex back office automation tools and everything you possibly want. But then, I mean, we know people that use those services and then they stop because their investors just keep calling them because they can't find a document in the portal. Okay. So, if you have a documents tab and they've got to travel 4 levels down document folders to find a single document, that's crazy. And you're not really serving them well. So I think user experience is the key thing that we think we're doing better, or we hope to do better than our competitors.
And so if they need to update their entity or something like that, I assume you'd go to profile to do that, and that automatically updates in other places. Is that right? Exactly right. Yeah. So this is kind of their contact information that updates in the CRM. And that's just their profile overview. And then their investment profiles are those entities that they want to actually invest with. Okay. So, Dave Smith Trust in this case, that has a payment, this one has a check attached, but as a payment preference attached, you could add new ones or edit them, and then it edits across all their investments. So if somebody has 10 investments, 5 with Dave Smith Trust, 5 with, and under his personal social security number, and then he goes to update the payment or the payment preference where he wants to receive distributions in one, it'll update it across all of those investments as well. And the other thing is it notifies the sponsor and says, hey, Dave wants to update this, do you want to approve that and send a message? So on the sponsor side, it's easy as well. Okay. And I guess they're able to use different entities for different deals or? Exactly. Yeah. So if we were to go add a new legal entity, so you could use the same entity for every single deal. If you just if I'm just investing as Josiah, I can use my personal legal entity, which is my social, for every single deal. But if I have a partnership with my brother, so I can invest with that one on a few deals, with my own on a few deals. And then as they go through the investment process, they just select which profile do you want to invest with in this investment. Okay, nice. Yeah, that makes sense. And then if they update that profile, then any deals that are connected to that profile will get updated. Okay. Yeah, and you're touching on a really good point here, because we didn't always have it built this way. And we built it in a different way because I don't know, the math on it is hard to work out. What's the best way to design this? And the way we designed it initially wasn't as good. And so somebody on each investment, they'd have to go in and change the payment preference for that individual investment. And then they also had it like a bank account attached to their profile. So they would go and update it in one place and hope that it updated everywhere else, and it expected it would. And that leads to little user experience things like that lead to big sponsor problems where the sponsor is running a distribution now and sending money and it's going to an old bank account. Right. So this was a big update we made this year that's made this a ton easier for everybody involved. And it's one of those little intuitive things that is not intuitive to create. Right. That makes sense. Yeah. But from the investor's perspective, that's probably how they would expect it to work. And that's right. What you want to do wherever possible is make it where it is intuitive. It works the way you would expect it to. Yeah. Exactly. So I think there's portfolio documents, frequently asked questions, or, this is kind of a site-wide frequently asked questions. And that's something the sponsor or syndicator can add their own FAQ then, basically. Yeah. So a lot of syndicators we were working with had that on a website somewhere for about a deal. So we added it in 2 places. So first of all, in each deal, they can have an FAQ. So in investment 1 here, there's an FAQ, and that's specific to the investment. And then there's also one that's broad to the whole portal. So any questions about who do I contact about XYZ or whatever those might be. Okay. Makes sense. Yeah. So those are the big things there. And then the last thing here is kind of the opportunity. And I'll just be brief on this, but the opportunity first of all, it shows to the appropriate person in the deal. So if you have a 506B and it's non-accredited and accredited, then it'll show to everybody in the portal. And if you have a 506C, it'll only show to accredited, but it shows up in their, kind of at the top of their feed as a marketing opportunity for them. And then it basically just becomes a central
place for you to put all of your marketing assets. So usually you'll create your pitch deck, your real estate investment pitch deck. You'll have it. And this kind of just gives you a really good looking place to aggregate all of that. That's been tested and works well to get people to invest. So you have the investment highlights, you have some assumptions that you can put in, your documents. You can actually embed the pitch deck as a PDF so they can scroll through that and download it. You can embed media, images or most of our sponsors will do a webinar launching it, so they'll embed the webinar. And then frequently asked questions, which is on the opportunity side, that's a big deal. That's where you end up getting a ton of emails back and forth. Every time you get an email, you can put it as a question in here and prevent the next person from having to send an email.
Yeah.
And then once they actually go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, so this is nice, I think, because like a person might be logging in to look at one of their existing investments, but then they see this opportunity and they can check it out kind of on their own. And maybe let you know.
Exactly right. And we have, sponsors. When we first launched this to one of our clients, I remember they were doing a big raise and they weren't sure if they were going to hit their number with the raise. And they said they emailed me and said, "Hey, we woke up this morning with $300,000 extra dollars in our bank account because 2 people in a previous deal had logged in and seen the opportunity. We hadn't even talked to them, and they went through the investment process and invested." So like that's a huge win if it's just because they're going there. They're just like, the thing you want to train them to do is to log in all the time and like log in to see their project update instead of sending it via email. Log in and see it securely. Log in to see your documents securely, right? So once they're trained to do that, the new opportunity is right there, and it's a quick investment process. So it's makes it kind of frictionless for them to actually invest.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then the last thing is kind of the investment process. And I actually don't know if I have this configured, right? This is on our test server. So I'll try to just show you real quick, but it might give us a bug.
Okay.
So, it's kind of like a 5-minute investment process. They go through, enter investment amount, they answer some basic questions about whether they're accredited. Here's where they'll select their investment profile. So if they have a bunch, they can select from which one they want to invest with, or they can add a new one here. And that includes how they want to receive their payments. And then step 3, and as you can see, if this guy's already invested, it's all already on file. So it's click, 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 and then he's ready to sign documents. Let's see. This is the part that I don't know if it'll work. Looks like I got it configured right. So then this takes him to DocuSign and actually pre-fills his document out. So all of that information pre-fills in the DocuSign. This is something that we help our sponsors set up to where, DocuSign is the standard for e-signing, and you don't have to do this process exactly like this, but really to make it a smooth experience, make it good on mobile phones, on tablets. This is the best process. It takes them to DocuSign. They can verify that all that information is correct, hit finish, takes them back to the portal and gives them wiring instructions. So for a real estate syndicator, that's really like that's the 506B workflow to a T, and even 506C. It's pretty much that. This process, this workflow tool we built, it's actually customizable. So we can build different workflows for different types of offerings. So if somebody's needs to verify the accreditation status, instead of just ask them, we add a step here to have them upload their accreditation documents. Or if somebody needs, there's even one we're doing now where it's KYC verification. So they have to upload a passport or whatever the extra step in the process is. If people are doing different type of deals, we can customize this to work with them. But it's a pretty clear and easy process with a syndication, a 506B. And it's, I pretty much go through the whole thing and do it in an automated way. I'll hit mark fund sent, sponsor gets notified. And then on the back end, we've replaced the capital raise or like the spreadsheets, and you have a tool that shows you everybody who's come through the deal.
Cool. And so, let's see. And so they would basically they would do the wire transfer, and then they mark it as paid, and that kind of lets you know that they've sent it, or they told you they've sent it. Of course, you'd verify that, but that kind of moves them along in the process, I guess, to the next step then.
That's right. And so usually this is what we're actually building a payouts like distribution payouts, like an automation where you could actually send funds and investors could actually wire funds in. We're not done with that yet, but probably in the next quarter, maybe quarter and a half, that will be done, so that you could have an option of letting them actually send the money from here as well.
Oh,
but
from within the system, they would send it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's coming soon. But this process lets them, receive wiring instructions, notify the sponsor, and this is another important step from the sponsor perspective, which is, hey, if I have 100 people that wired me funds today, I don't need every single one of them calling me to tell me that I've wired funds and then bothering me for the next 3 days about whether I've got it or not, because it takes some time. So we found just having hey, we got it. Like, thanks for letting us know. Give us 3 to 5 days and we'll send you a notice. It reduces so much pressure on the sponsor in this part of the process, where the sponsors, they're going to see they check every morning. Okay, we got 10 wires in, and then they go into the back end, mark funds received, send notice. And he gets notice, hey, your 100,000 was received. Here's a welcome letter. So it just reduces so much pressure that's built into the kind of syndication process.
Right. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, because people they want that confirmation that their money's been received. So it sounds like that makes it easier to send those notifications.
Yeah, ideally it automates the process, but it also creates more clarity for the investors, so they don't feel like, hey, are you paying attention to me? Like, hey, I sent 50 grand. What's going on? Like, that's the thing that you don't want to have during that process. I think that's probably it for the demo side. If anyone wants to do we do personalized demos. We actually have a demo on the website that's like an instant demo. And then if somebody wanted to do a personalized demo, I could show them more of the back office tools and the administrative side of things, how we kind of automate that part of things. Yeah,
because what we saw was what the investor sees, but I guess you do demos too of what the syndicator or sponsor sees as well. And
exactly. Okay. Exactly. Yeah, how they would manage things. So there's things like, I think it all becomes more important with size. Like, the bigger you get, the more you scale. The converse of that is, or the inverse of that, I don't know which one it is that, it helps you to scale, right? If you have the right tool, you're able to scale. So if you're really going to go scale your business, and you need the tool to do it. But, if you're uploading K1s for 50 investors, instead of creating 50 folders in in Dropbox, you drop 50 documents onto a bulk upload thing. It auto matches the name to the appropriate investor and then sends out notices to all of them. So it's little things like that sponsors are doing all the time that we try to create automations for and make super easy, so that it's like, people have nightmares over getting K1s out on time when you have 100 investors in 10 deals. It's 1,000 people. And it's that same type of pressure where it's like, hey, I'm doing my taxes. Hey, I'm doing my taxes. I got to have my K1. Hey, I'm doing my taxes. So you get a month of that type of pressure that if you're able to just click a button and everybody gets notices, hey, they're all in the portal. It's the same answer for everybody. It just reduces so much stress.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that sounds pretty awesome. Yeah, because you don't want to get it to them late, and then they have to file an extension over you, because you've got the documents late. So,
and everybody we know is like, you're on that timeline, and you're like right at the end is when it actually happens with everybody. So to just have that be reliable and it's an email login, you don't have to be mailing it out and make sure that the address is right. And whatever those additional steps are, like, hey, you can get anybody logged into the portal, get them access to their documents. All of their K1s are there from previous years. So it's just, I guess it gives you kind of the peace of mind that you have a process that's very clear and concise of how to get it done.
Yeah. Another thing I noticed when we were in there, you show the wire instructions, and people, you said in some cases upload their passport. I noticed on your website, you talk about security, and I can see why that would be important. But why can you talk a little bit about why syndicators or sponsors should be concerned about security?
Yes. So, I mean, the biggest, there's probably different things I've done a couple. I have like a white paper on the basic cybersecurity practices that real estate syndicators should be paying attention to. And I'll give you just a couple really, really brief ones. Some of them are on the investor side, or the syndicator side, which is use a password management tool. Like, so new technology is difficult to start using, and it's always a barrier. There's a little bit of a barrier to entry. There's a tool we use called LastPass. It's free, and it just basically you have one really complex password that you create. Now you have to create a new one. You don't use an old one, and then you go through all of your old bank logins, your email logins, all of that stuff, and it will auto generate new complex passwords for those. And store them in a central secure database. So you just have to have the one. You might have two-factor authentication for that password protection thing, but then it becomes a central hub for your passwords. Why is that important? Because the number one way syndicators, private equity companies, and typically this has happened at wealth management firms, which are bigger versions of what we're talking about here. But just because we're syndicators and we're entrepreneurs and we're kind of startups in this space, eventually a good syndicator becomes a private equity real estate company, becomes you grow in that role. And with that comes like a target risk from people who are actively hacking and looking for easy targets. And the easiest target is, like if you're a syndicator, it's for you having your email that doesn't have a secure password. And there was a password hack last year. I mean, there's been a few big password hacks, but I guess it's been 3 years ago now. I went and looked. There was this website called haveibeenpwned.com, PWNED. And you type in your email address, and it's basic. Right now, it's just yes or no. Have I been pwned? And it's like, hey, there's 4 different email addresses or passwords associated with this email address that are publicly available on the internet. So you should probably change it. Back when I did it, it told me the passwords. It showed me all of my passwords I've been using since high school. And I was like, oh my gosh, and it was all of them, like all of the main passwords I use. So at that point, I was like, I have to use my bank login, my email login. So, and I didn't do anything weird. Like I'm a normal person doing normal logins everywhere. So there have been so many high level hacks of like Uber and, Dropbox and whoever it is. And that doesn't mean those are bad companies. It's just the world we live in. So you end up with a password list of this email is associated with this password, and people just go get access. And what they'll do is they'll get access to your email address, and they'll log into the email and they'll just sit on it. They don't do anything. And then they're just watching for keywords and for opportunities to phish or take over an email. So a great example is send payment to XYZ. That's the big one. And that's where with real estate transactions, this happens all the time in regular real estate and in wealth management. People sit on an email address that's going to say send payment instructions to, or it has to do with large sums of money. When that email comes through, they quickly delete it. They copy it, change the account and routing number, and resend it as the person. So the person wires the money directly to the hacker, and with a wire transfer, there's no transfer back. It's $50,000 out the door. So that's actually the wire fraud is the single biggest risk to syndicators. And there's a couple different ways to prevent that. So way number one, never send wire instructions through email at all. Just don't send wire instructions through email, because even if you've done a good job and you have LastPass and your two-factor authentication, which are the easy things to do, you're sending an email to 50 investors. And if one of them has their email hacked, it's the same problem. That's $50,000 gone to the wrong place. And the sponsors I know who have had this happen, which I know 3, one had $200,000 and 2 had $50,000. And they all just ate it. They had to pay that investor that money out of pocket because they didn't want to hurt their business. So it's so the point is, for yourself, password protection, and then for the portal provides you a secure login. We have two-factor authentication for admins, and you're embedding wiring instructions behind all of that. So you have a login and authentication and two-factor authentication. So you can tell all the investors, listen, you're not going to get anything over email. Go to our portal. Nobody's going to be able to break into the portal and change this because we have security on the portal to make sure it doesn't happen. So if you go there, you're going to see the right thing. So that's the biggest, the biggest practical concern for a syndicator they should be kind of looking out for.
Yeah, which is kind of similar to like what banks usually tell you to do. Don't ever don't ever click a link in there and
Right.
in an email to log into your bank account, to go directly to the website. It sounds like that's something that'd be smart to train investors to do too.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is like if I guess the second level thing is if you're a syndicator, let's talk like the PPM or subscription documents. Well, the subscription documents that's my life on that document that I've signed on there. It's my social security number, my net worth, my, everything is on there. So just, it's very easy being an entrepreneur. You're trying to just get the money in the door and close the deal. But that type of stuff is not the best to share over email at all. So instead of emailing it to the investor to complete a documents and doing that type of thing, like have that stuff synced to the portal and like log into the portal to view that stuff so that you're not risking their information, being kind of publicly available in their email inbox.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. And so now maybe we could talk a little bit about your pricing. And I don't want to get into the specific numbers because I know that those kind of things can change over time, but what kind of structure does your pricing have? Is it based on the number of investors or the number of deals, or how's that based?
So, and we've actually been messing with this a little bit or trying to change it to align with people's actual deal structures. This is kind of in flux right now. We had been doing up till just recently, number of investors and number of projects. So, I think on our website right now, it's up to 100 investors and then up to 150 and then unlimited after that. We're experimenting a little bit with a capital under management model, which is if you're managing 5 million or less in capital, it will cost you less than somebody who's managing 100 million. It kind of just makes sense to align economically in that way that if somebody's not making as much money, that we don't charge them as much. But so that's some of the ways that we're thinking about it. Like I said, we're kind of going under or testing our pricing a little bit. So the main thing that we think about is, and then we charge a setup fee to kind of get everything in the portal to white label it to whatever degree we're white labeling it. And a big part of that initial setup for us is if you're doing the capital raise version where you're actually raising for a deal, we assign an account manager for you for 30 to 45 days. And that's like a phone number that you can call to where you're just going to have success raising the money, like with the technology part of it. Mm-hmm. And we've just done it so many times that we know how to get your documents set up right in DocuSign. It's a huge, it's a huge hassle to have to go back and resubmit documents for everybody and, somebody signed wrong. And there's some just technical knowledge of how to do things in an e-signing environment that's really helpful. And then additionally, every SEC attorney is different and they draft up the documents different with different language. So we would like to be able to help with that the first time to just make sure that it's a huge success in the capital raise process. Yeah, and then the monthly pricing, it depends on the size of your company. I mean, we're trying to figure out how to count the size of the company, and that's the thing that we're playing with. But we try to have a fair price based on the size of the company. Anyone for us that's actually dealing with the challenges that we've been discussing today, and is really looking for a solution to organize their business and to improve their investor experience, or they're good clients for us, and we'll try to find a way to, to either get them a tier of investor deal room that solves their most urgent needs, and give them a path to upgrade it as it makes sense for them as they grow their business and scale.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And then, so you said you help with the branding too of the portal, like when somebody signs up, you guys help with that.
Yeah. So, and there's different levels of that. So we upload their logo. We try to match like the image of their homepage. So usually people will have like an imagery in their homepage or throughout the website. So we'll add that as a background image. Yeah. And then depending on your level of customization, we can go deeper and do more styling type things.
All right. And I assume there's some kind of ongoing support to include with that. I know that initially there is, but also I assume if people have questions or whatever, they can contact you guys and get help with that.
Yeah. So we have 1.5 full-time support people. So we have a person that's full-time on support that mans our support desk. And then I also man support semi-regularly to help with things too. And then that's aside from Jesse, who does our account management. And that's like during that first raise that you do, he's one-on-one phone number support, and like more than just the 9 to 5 business hour type thing. Because when somebody's going through a capital raise, and time is really, really critical. So we try to give them a little more hands-on help and make sure they're successful through the actual capital raise.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's cool. And it sounds like too that from what I saw on your website that you, like when somebody signs up, you will even help with putting some of their previous deals into your system. Is that right?
Yeah. So yes. So we'll upload previous deals or help you upload deals depending on kind of the contract initially. And some people want to just do it they'll sometimes we'll do it where if you have a new deal and that's going to fund getting the portal initially, you'll just start with a new deal. And then, once that's kind of died down, you'll backload a couple of your old deals to add them all there. So we work with everybody's situation to upload their previous deals. We just did one client where we just uploaded 16 previous deals for them. And then another client, we worked out a different deal where they wanted to handle some of the work a little more themselves. And I think they had 20 deals. We uploaded 3 and they did the other, showed them how, and then they did the other 17. So.
And what's the advantage of having those previous deals in there that have already?
It's like your investors, like I really love launching, and I love the experience that our sponsors get when they launch, when they already have investors that have a level of expectation from the sponsor, and then they're launching, like they upload all of their deals. Let's say it's 5 deals that you're in, and now you log in and all of your deals are already there. Your distributions are all there. You have totals, you have ROI, like all of that stuff is showing all of a sudden. So your level of transparency you're providing to an investor has gone through the roof from a monthly email update. So that's aside from just the capital raise part, if you have a bunch of deals for investors, it's a night and day difference in them being able to see those all in one place.
Yeah, I'm sure it'd be nice to see that history and have it all like you said, all in one place. Okay, cool. Mm-hmm. And so did I understand correctly that you have a special deal for our listeners?
Yeah. So for your listeners, we're actually doing $1,000 off onboarding fees. So whatever package they get with us, we'll knock $1,000 off onboarding, and make it easy for them to come on, whether it's during the next deal or whether they want to just upload previous deals and get started.
Wow, that's awesome. Thanks so much for doing that. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
And so what do they need to do then to get that $1,000 off?
Yes. So if they just mentioned that they heard about us on this show, on the Apartment Investor Pro show, we'll honor that. And usually we take, if it's just they're raising for a new deal, we usually take about a week to set up a portal, depending on how much we're white labeling it and branding it. And then if they're doing previous deals, it can take, to backload everything, it sometimes takes 6 to 8 weeks to backload previous deals. So just keep that in mind when you're actually raising. A lot of our clients will come to us right as they're coming up to the new deal, because that's when they're going to make a big chunk of money. Like, okay, let's get the portal up and going, and then we'll upload some previous deals and kind of help them do a big launch for their next deal.
Okay, awesome. That's great. Well, we definitely appreciate you doing that. And so what would be the best way for our listeners to connect with you then if they want to learn more about you and Investor Deal Room?
Yeah, so our website is investordealroom.com. You can reach out via the contact page on our website. You can also schedule a demo. There's a bunch of demo links all over the website, so that you can do an instant demo or schedule a personalized demo if you want to actually go through and look at it personally and ask questions. Or you can just email me at josiah@investordealroom.com. It's JOSIAH@investordealroom.com.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on today. I appreciate too the behind the scenes demo too, to see how that works. And I can see it's a really powerful tool for investors. It can really save a lot of money. So, a lot of time.
I appreciate you having me. You asked great questions, and it was fun coming on.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. Have a good rest of your day. You've got investors. Fantastic. But how can you make sure they love investing with you so much that they'll want to put themselves on repeat? Well, it basically boils down to your processes and communication. I've put together a free guide called Resources to Keep Your Investors Coming Back for More, just for this purpose. Download it at apartmentinvestorpro.com/keep-investors. That's apartmentinvestorpro.com/keep, K-E-E-P, investors, no spaces. So go there and download that so you can keep your investors coming back for more. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Apartment Investor Pro podcast. Be sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes. Also, visit our website at apartmentinvestorpro.com and connect with us.